Yeah.
Sex is part of it, but that's not a focus.
But was it a physical relationship where you both were just attracted to each other?
No, is that there was a
way, and I didn't even realize how much stress I was under. Cody just had really specific things that he liked,
Right.
and when he came over, I'd want to, sure, let's go ahead and cook the kind of dinner.
They told us Robyn was the sweet peacemaker, the one who only wanted love, unity, and harmony. But when you look closer at the cracks, you see a very different truth. Behind the tears and the soft voice, Robyn's choices and control were the sparks that burned the Brown family to the ground. Hey everyone, I'm Sarah, and welcome back to TLC's Sister Wives Daily. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives, and let me know in the comments what you think about Robyn's role in all of this, because this story is going to stir up some strong feelings. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on Robyn's carefully polished image, using only what TLC's cameras actually showed us. And once you see the patterns, you'll never look at her the same way again. When Robyn first entered the Brown family, TLC painted her as the answer to everything the wives had been struggling with. She was soft-spoken, gentle, and carried herself as if she were the family's rescuer. From the very beginning, the cameras leaned into the idea that she was the one who would bring peace and balance to Cody's chaotic household. The storyline was clear. Robyn was not just another wife. She was Cody's soulmate. While Meri, Janelle, and Christine carried years of exhaustion and frustration, Robyn arrived as fresh, romantic, and endlessly patient. The show even framed her as a stabilizing force, someone above the conflicts the other wives were weighed down by. But hidden inside those early chapters were the first signs of her growing influence. Cody's legal divorce from Meri, a shocking decision at the time, happened solely so he could legally marry Robyn. And that marriage was more than just paperwork. It was the foundation that gave Robyn and her children a protected, permanent place in the family, while the other wives remained only spiritually tied. The adoption of her 3rd child. Wren became another storyline that reinforced Robyn's pure intentions, even though it further cemented her favored position and left the original wives to silently question their place. This carefully built image of Robyn as the gentle peacemaker didn't just win over Cody. It also worked as a shield. Whenever tension rose, the cameras often framed Christine, Janelle, or Meri as the ones creating drama. Robyn, meanwhile, was portrayed as the victim, the calm, patient figure who was simply caught in the storm. That early narrative made it almost impossible to question her motives, even as the cracks slowly started to show. As the seasons moved forward, Robyn's role as the innocent struggler slowly began to unravel. On the surface, she often presented herself as overwhelmed, the wife who was just trying to make ends meet, the one who claimed she wasn't asking for much. But behind that soft image was a very different reality. Robyn was carefully positioning herself for lasting financial security, while the other wives were left juggling instability. Take the storyline of the houses versus rentals. Time and again, the other wives found themselves moving into temporary rentals, fighting with the stress of uprooting children and feeling uncertain about the future. Robyn, however, ended up with a permanent, stable home, one that came with a steep price tag and set the tone for where Cody's priorities truly were. While Christine and Janelle struggled with practical needs, Robyn's housing choices seemed to always come first, cloaked in the idea that it was just what her family needed. This same pattern appeared with the land at Coyote Pass. The wives all had their own visions, but the division always seemed to tilt in Robyn's favor. Her preferences, whether about the size, the location, or the long-term plans, were quietly treated as non-negotiable. While the others debated and compromised, Robyn's wants carried the most weight, even if no one said it out loud. And then there were the financial decisions. Christine and Janelle, in particular, often shouldered heavy burdens, whether it was managing household expenses or worrying about the future. Meanwhile, Robyn lived with a kind of stability that the others were denied. Over time, that imbalance created deep resentment, because what looked like fairness on the surface was anything but. Robyn's financial security became a silent wedge, driving the wives further apart while she maintained her carefully polished role as the one who was just doing her best. The cracks in Robyn's halo really began to show once viewers saw clear, undeniable moments of favoritism play out on screen. TLC might have tried to frame her as the gentle, long-suffering wife, but the footage told a very different story. One where Cody's devotion to Robyn and her children eclipsed his bond with the rest of the family. Episode after episode, we saw examples that couldn't be brushed aside. Cody prioritized Robyn's household with an intensity that no other wife received. Simple things like time, energy, and even empathy were channeled directly toward her and her kids, while the others were left waiting for scraps. Christine and Janelle, who had built this family for decades, started to say out loud what fans had been whispering for years. Cody wasn't even trying to balance his affections anymore. The pandemic brought that favoritism into the sharpest focus. Cody rolled out a list of strict household rules: disinfecting mail, wiping down groceries, no socializing outside the bubble. And those rules, conveniently, mirrored the exact boundaries Robyn had set for her household. When Christine and Janelle pushed back, pointing out how unrealistic and isolating the demands were, Cody dug in his heels. It wasn't about protecting the family as a whole. It was about protecting Robyn's family on her terms. Noth. Inge made that clearer than the heartbreaking divide between the kids. Janelle's sons, especially Gabriel and Garrison, were treated like they were disposable. Their needs, their emotional health, and even their relationship with their father came second to Robyn's comfort. Meanwhile, Robyn's children were fiercely guarded, kept close, and framed as the ones Cody had to protect above all else. The contrast was gut-wrenching. One set of kids pushed aside, while another was shielded like royalty. This wasn't just favoritism anymore. It was proof that the balance in the Brown family had collapsed. The wives and children outside Robyn's bubble weren't just neglected. They were sacrificed to keep Robyn's world intact. And once that truth was visible on screen, the peacemaker image could never look the same again. By the time the cracks in Robyn's halo became too obvious to ignore, the damage had already been done. What TLC once packaged as a united plural family had unraveled, leaving behind women who carried years of emotional strain, sacrifice, and disappointment. And while Cody doubled down on protecting Robyn's comfort, the other wives bore the crushing toll of neglect, favoritism, and betrayal. Christine's story became the turning point, the first domino to fall in the collapse of the Brown family as we knew it. For years, Christine had been the wife who kept the family spirit alive. She cooked the big dinners, kept holidays joyful, and worked endlessly to foster unity between children who often felt divided by circumstance. But her breaking point came after watching Cody's affection shrink to nothing more than obligation. The moment that still haunts fans is when she revealed on camera that Cody had openly admitted he was no longer attracted to her. Those words were devastating, not only because of their cruelty, but because they confirmed what Christine Allritzer, 80, knew. Cody's heart had shifted permanently into Robyn's corner. The final straw wasn't just about romance, it was about family. Christine saw her children, especially Isabel, treated as afterthoughts. When Isabel needed surgery, Cody made excuses about COVID travel, refusing to be there for her during one of the most vulnerable moments of her life. Yet this same man was willing to bend over backward to maintain daily presence in Robyn's household. That hypocrisy hit Christine like a hammer. After years of enduring the loneliness, the constant compromises, and the humiliation of being pushed aside, she finally found the courage to say enough. Christine's decision to leave wasn't just a personal victory, it was a declaration that she would no longer allow herself or her children to be emotionally starved while Robyn's family lived in security. Her departure sent shockwaves through the Browns, proof that the foundation of plural marriage had completely fractured. Janelle, on the other hand, walked a slower but equally powerful path toward independence. Unlike Christine, Janelle had always been pragmatic. She entered plural marriage because she believed in building something bigger than herself, something that combined faith, family, and shared resources. For years, she tolerated the imbalances, throwing herself into raising her children and managing finances. But as Cody's rules tightened during the pandemic, and as his patience with her children grew thinner, Janelle began to see the writing on the wall. She watched her sons, Gabriel and Garrison, be villainized for simply wanting a relationship with their dad while also living normal young adult lives. Cody's anger toward them, his refusal to compromise or even acknowledge their pain, stood in stark contrast to the gentleness he reserved for Robyn's kids. Janelle reached her breaking point when she realized Cody wasn't just neglecting her, he was actively harming the bond between father and son, all because protecting Robyn's bubble mattered more. That's when Janelle started quietly carving out her independence. She stood up to Cody in some of the most raw, memorable scenes, calling out his hypocrisy and demanding fairness. Unlike Robyn, who often framed herself as a victim of circumstance, Janelle refused to play that game. She wasn't going to be pitied. She wasn't going to grovel for scraps of attention. She was going to live on her own terms. By the time Christine had already walked away, Janelle was right behind her. Not just in spirit, but in practical independence. And fans could see it. This was no longer a plural marriage. It was a one-wife marriage with Robyn at the center, and the others finding their own exits. And then there was Meri, the original wife, the one who gave Cody the legitimacy to pursue plural marriage in the first place. Meri's story may be the most heartbreaking of all because her isolation was decades in the making. Long before Robyn entered the picture, Meri's relationship with Cody had become strained and brittle. But when Robyn arrived, that isolation turned into replacement. Meri was the one who legally divorced Cody so that he could marry Robyn and adopt her children. At the time, it was framed as a selfless act, Meri sacrificing her status for the greater good of the family. But in reality, it marked her permanent displacement. From that moment on, Meri's role dwindled into the background. She tried to hold on, even as Cody admitted publicly that there was no romantic connection left between them. She endured humiliation after humiliation, staying tethered to a man who had already moved on emotionally and legally. And through it all, Robyn never hesitated to step into the place Meri once held. The contrast was painful. Meri standing on the outside, clinging to the hope of reconciliation. Robyn, firm, rooted inside, secure in her position as the legal wife and favored partner. The emotional burden carried by these women is something fans will never forget. Christine carried years of rejection before she finally chose herself. Janelle carried the impossible weight of protecting her children while watching them be discarded by their father. Meri carried the grief of being replaced while still trying to prove she mattered. And what made it even harder to swallow was the fact that Robyn's position never seemed threatened. While the other wives cried on camera, broke down in confessional interviews, and wrestled with the trauma of abandonment, Robyn maintained her security. She was shielded, both by Cody's devotion and by a narrative that painted her as the innocent peacemaker. But fans saw through it. They saw the imbalance, the favoritism, and the human cost of a system that elevated one woman's comfort, while others were crushed under emotional neglect. Act by act, season by season, the sister wives' story stopped being about a family trying to live plural marriage and became the story of women finding their voices in the shadow of a man who chose one wife over all the rest. By the end of it, Christine had walked out with her dignity intact. Janelle had chosen independence. And Meri, though still tethered in name, had lost the marriage she once sacrificed everything to build. Meanwhile, Robyn stood in the center, untouched, her position secure, but her halo forever tarnished in the eyes of those who watched the truth unfold. When we talk about the downfall of the Brown family, it's easy to focus on the adults. Christine, Janelle, Meri, Cody, and Robyn. But the real heartbreak, the real scars, are written on the faces of the children. They didn't ask to be born into a polygamist reality show. They didn't choose favoritism, financial battles, or emotional manipulation, yet they paid the steepest price. And TLC's cameras caught enough to make that crystal clear. Let's go back for a moment to one of the most emotional chapters in the family's story, Christine's youngest daughter, Truly. When Truly suffered a frightening medical crisis as a toddler, it was Christine who was left holding the weight. She rushed Truly to the hospital, terrified, praying her little girl would make it through. But where was Cody? His attention, as always, was divided, but not evenly. Christine described being alone during that moment, navigating life or death decisions for her child without her husband at her side. And when you stack that memory up against how present Cody always seemed for Robyn's children, it paints a painful picture. For Christine, it wasn't just that Cody wasn't there. It was that he could have been there, but wasn't. Now compare that to Robyn's children. Every doctor's visit, every milestone, every small crisis, Cody was glued to their side. He doted on them in ways the other wives and kids could only dream of. On camera, he cried about being terrified for their safety. He built his whole identity around being the protective father for Robyn's kids. And that's where resentment quietly grew. Because Christine, Janelle, and Meri's children saw the difference too. They weren't blind. They noticed who got the hugs, who got the protection, and who got excuses. The pandemic era is where this favoritism reached its boiling point, especially for Janelle's boys, Gabriel and Garrison. When Cody laid down his infamous strict COVID rules, everyone assumed it was about safety. But the rules he enforced lined up neatly with how Robyn ran her household. Robyn and her kids became the gold standard, the ones Cody claimed were obedient and respectful, while Janelle's sons were portrayed as reckless, rebellious, and irresponsible. The truth was far more complex. These were young men trying to balance work, school, and relationships, all while their father demanded loyalty to rules that seemed designed to isolate them. Gabriel, in one of the most gut-wrenching scenes of the entire series, broke down crying as he described what it felt like to lose his dad. He was emotional, raw, and desperate. And still, Cody minimized his pain. He didn't wrap his arms around his son. He didn't apologize. He didn't show that same fierce fatherly love he always reserves for Robyn's kids. Instead, he scolded Gabriel, suggesting he was the problem. That moment hit fans like a punch in the chest because it was undeniable proof that the favoritism had crossed from subtle to brutal. And let's not forget Garrison. He too faced the fallout. He stood his ground, refusing to move back under Cody's thumb, and in return, he was treated as disposable. Cody essentially shrugged and implied that if his sons didn't fall in line, it was their loss. Imagine being a young man trying to build independence and realizing your father values obedience to one wife's rules over his relationship with you. That kind of wound doesn't just fade. It lingers, reshaping how you see yourself and your place in your own family. Meanwhile, Robyn's kids, they never had to question where they stood. Cody's protection was unwavering. He talked about them as though they were fragile glass that had to be kept safe at all costs. Even TLC's editing couldn't soften the contrast. Cody, standing by Robyn's children, while his other children pleaded for scraps of attention. The ripple effect spread across the entire family. Christine's kids, especially the older ones, grew up watching their mom shoulder burdens alone. Isabel's heartbreaking scoliosis surgery is another glaring example. While Christine flew her daughter across the country for a major surgery, Cody stayed behind, citing COVID risks that somehow never stopped him from being constantly present in Robyn's home. Isabel tried to smile through it, but the disappointment is clear. What daughter doesn't want her dad by her side in the hospital? Instead, she got excuses. While Robyn's kids always got presents, Janelle's children felt it too. Maddie, Logan, Hunter, they all experienced versions of the same message. You'll never come first. You'll never get the same father your siblings in Robyn's home have. And that kind of division doesn't just harm relationships with Cody, it fractures the sibling bonds too. Because when some kids are treasured and others neglected, resentment grows between brothers and sisters who should have been united. Even Meri's only child, Leon, wasn't spared from the fallout. As Meri drifted further into isolation, Leon experienced firsthand what it meant to be marginalized within the family. Cody was emotionally absent, Meri was left to carry the pain, and Leon was caught in the middle. While Robyn's kids were treated as a precious central unit, Leon grew up watching their own household fade into the background. So when we say the children paid the highest price, it isn't exaggeration. They carried the silent wounds of favoritism, neglect, and double standards. Truly learned what it meant to have a father who wasn't there when it mattered most. Isabel endured a surgery without her dad's support. Gabriel and Garrison were forced to either sacrifice their independence or lose their father's love. And in the end, they lost him anyway. Leon bore the burden of isolation alongside Meri. And through it all, Robyn's children were lifted up as the chosen ones, always shielded, always prioritized. Looking back, the cameras captured more than a family trying to survive polygamy. They captured the slow unraveling of trust between a father and his children. They showed the way favoritism poisoned not just marriages, but the next generation. And they left us with haunting images of kids crying, begging, and questioning woe. They weren't enough. That's the legacy of Robyn's entrance into the family and Cody's obsession with her household. The women bore the emotional weight, but the children bore the generational scars. And long after the cameras stop rolling, those scars will remain. By the time Christine announced she was leaving, the writing was already on the wall for the Browns. Years of tension had been simmering, but her departure was the moment the cracks that TLC had long tried to smooth over became undeniable. What had once been packaged as a united polygamous family, 4 wives, 1 husband, and a dozen-plus children under one faith and vision, was now splintering right in front of the cameras. Family gatherings, which had always been central to the Browns' identity, became fewer, more strained, and eventually impossible. Where once there had been laughter around long tables, with kids running in and out of frame, now there was silence, awkwardness, or complete absence. The tension was not hidden, it seeped into every group conversation, every holiday plan, and every failed attempt to bring everyone together. And at the center of it was a glaring imbalance. Robyn's wants and Robyn's household always seemed to dictate the terms. Christine leaving was the turning point that nobody could ignore. She had been the wife most willing to carry the burden of polygamy, raising her children largely alone, pushing through financial challenges, and even defending Cody when his neglect was obvious. For her to finally reach the point of saying enough showed just how broken the structure had become. She wasn't leaving in a moment of heat. She was leaving after years of feeling like a single parent in a marriage where her husband was fully present only with one wife. Christine's breaking away wasn't just her freedom. It was the moment the entire family lost its foundation. Janelle, too, was no longer willing to quit, at least carry the imbalance. Once the practical wife, the one who kept the family's finances running and often sacrificed her own comfort for the group, she began to voice the frustration that had been building for years. The pandemic only heightened it. While her children were pushed away, Robyn's children were guarded and prioritized. Janelle stood her ground, reminding Cody that fairness and accountability mattered more than bending to Robyn's comfort zone. What viewers saw was not just a wife disagreeing with her husband, it was a woman standing up after decades of being overlooked, a mother defending her sons from the emotional fallout of favoritism. And then there was Meri. Her story was painful in a different way. Once the legal wife, she had sacrificed that position for Robyn under the promise that it was for the good of the family. But over time, her relationship with Cody was reduced to scraps. He admitted openly, on camera, that he had no romantic interest in her, that he didn't see them as being in a marriage anymore. Meri clung to the hope of reconciliation, and in doing so, became a ghost of her former self. Meanwhile, Robyn occupied the space that Meri had once held, publicly supported, emotionally affirmed, and seen as Cody's true partner. It was devastating for audiences to watch Meri's loyalty met with rejection, all while Robyn's image remained protected. The collapse wasn't sudden. It was the cumulative effect of years of small decisions that always seemed to go in Robyn's favor. A bigger house here, special rules there, legal privileges shifted in her direction. Each choice was defended as best for the family, but the result was always the same. One wife gained more security, while the others lost pieces of themselves. Christine's exit simply forced that imbalance into the light. For viewers, the shift in perception was dramatic. Robyn, once the sweet and selfless peacemaker, no longer looked untouchable. Her tears, once seen as genuine, now appeared to many as manipulative. Her constant emphasis on family unity rang hollow when unity seemed to mean everyone adjusting to her needs. The halo that had shielded her for years was finally cracking, and fans began to see what the other wives had long lived with, that her place in the family was never equal, but elevated. The irony was impossible to miss. The show had started with the premise of a man balancing multiple marriages, striving to love and lead fairly. But in reality, the balance was gone. Cody and Robyn functioned as a traditional monogamous couple, while the other wives were left orbiting around them, each one forced to decide whether to keep sacrificing or to walk away. Christine made her choice. Janelle was on the brink. Meri remained stuck in the shadows. And for Cody, the collapse revealed more than just the end of plural marriage. It revealed the cost of his choices. By favoring one wife so openly, he didn't just alienate his other partners. He fractured his relationships with his children, divided his family, and destroyed the very legacy he once claimed to value. Robyn may have been the last wife standing, but the cost was staggering. a broken family, angry children, and an audience no longer buying into the fairy tale. In the end, what became obvious was that the collapse was not caused by polygamy itself, but by the choices made within it. Polygamy was the backdrop, but favoritism, emotional neglect, and a refusal to self-reflect were the true reasons the family unraveled. And while Robyn remained in her role beside Cody, the halo she once wore had slipped, cracked, and shattered in the eyes of the other wives, and in the eyes of the world watching. When we step back from the drama, from the tears on screen, and the viral moments that get replayed again and again, there's a bigger question lingering. Why does all of this matter? The Brown family's unraveling is not just reality TV fodder, it's a case study in what happens when favoritism, control, and hidden manipulation are allowed to shape an entire household. Robyn wasn't simply another wife in a plural marriage. She became the axis around which Cody built his new world. And that choice came with a cost, paid by Christine, Janelle, Meri, and most painfully, their children. At the heart of this story is favoritism. TLC packaged the Browns as an experiment in unity, with Robyn framed as a gentle peacemaker. But time revealed that she was positioned differently than the others. Whether intentional or not, her presence magnified the imbalance that already existed. The other wives were often framed as difficult, resistant, or even disloyal, while Robyn was cast as the voice of reason, the calm in the storm. That narrative didn't just affect the show's edit, it shaped the real family dynamic. Favoritism corrodes relationships from the inside. When one wife and her children consistently receive more time, attention, and resources, the message is clear. Your needs matter less. We saw Christine hit her breaking point when she realized Cody would never show up for her children the way he showed up for Robyn's. Janelle began openly pushing back, refusing to rearrange her life around demands that always seemed to benefit only one corner of the family. And Meri, after years of loneliness, finally had to face the truth that there was no place for her anymore. Not when her sacrifices had been repurposed to build Robyn's secure foundation. But beneath the adult conflicts, it's the children who carried the deepest scars. Kids don't always understand the politics of plural marriage, but they feel the weight of favoritism in their bones. Truly watched her mother fight through a medical crisis largely alone. Gabriel and Garrison felt abandoned during the pandemic, forced into impossible choices that left them alienated from their father. Meanwhile, Robyn's children never had to question where they stood. They had Cody's consistent presence, protection, and loyalty. That contrast cut deep, leaving emotional wounds that will last far beyond the end of a TV season. And this is why the story resonates so strongly with viewers. Christine and Janelle's journeys are not just about leaving a bad marriage, they're about reclaiming their self-worth. Women everywhere see themselves in these struggles, staying too long in relationships where their needs are minimized, giving endlessly while receiving scraps, feeling invisible while someone else is placed on a pedestal. The courage Christine showed when she chose herself and her children is the kind of moment that reverberates far beyond the Brown family. It's why fans rallied around her. It wasn't just about disliking Robyn, it was about celebrating a woman who finally broke free. There's also a cultural significance in how Sister Wives has exposed the undercurrents of patriarchy in modern family structures. On the surface, the Browns were breaking stereotypes, presenting polygamy as a choice rooted in faith and love. But underneath, the same dynamics we see in traditional monogamous marriages played out in amplified form. A husband whose loyalty was conditional, wives pitted against each other, and children who bore the consequences of an unequal system. The show became a mirror, reflecting the painful truth that when control and favoritism guide a family, love cannot thrive. And perhaps the greatest irony of all is that Robyn, once marketed as the peacemaker, has become the symbol of division. Her very presence now embodies the fractures that destroyed the family. She didn't bring healing, she became the line in the sand, the figure around whom loyalty was tested and lost. Viewers no longer see her as the quiet, soft-spoken savior. They see the cracks, the inconsistencies, the carefully crafted image that no longer holds. So yes, this story matters. It matters because it's about more than gossip. It's about emotional survival. It's about women reclaiming their voices. It's about children and learning that they deserve equal love. And it's about audiences everywhere recognizing the destructive power of favoritism and control. In the end, the collapse of the Brown family is more than the downfall of a reality TV empire. It's a warning, a lesson, and for many, a source of inspiration. Because if Christine and Janelle can step away from decades of imbalance and still find the courage to start over, then maybe anyone watching at home, feeling invisible in their own lives, can too. And so, as we step back and look at the full picture, it's clear Robyn wasn't the only factor in the Brown family's collapse, but she was a powerful one. Her presence magnified Cody's worst instincts, fueled favoritism, and helped build a system where her own security always came first, while the other wives carried the cost. What makes this story sting isn't just the drama. It's the reminder of what happens when one person's carefully polished halo blinds everyone to the pain of those around them. Christine, Janelle, and even Meri each bore that weight in their own ways, and the family we once saw as united crumbled before our eyes. This is Sarah, and you've been watching TLC's Sister Wives Daily. I'd love to hear what you think. Was Robyn truly the peacemaker she claimed to be, or was she the spark that burned the family down? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you found this deep dive meaningful, please give the video a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next breakdown. Because here, we're not just watching Sister Wives, we're unpacking the truth behind it.